The
I love
grand
you so
ballroom of
much.
That's so
Boston
sweet of you too.
University
I love you,
shimmered under the glow
Sam.
of crystal chandeliers, their light refracting across
I love
polished
you
marble
too.
floors. It was the annual gala, a night where academia's elite mingled with the city's philanthropists, their laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. The event was a spectacle of opulence tables draped in ivory linens, servers weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Yet beneath the surface of elegance, whispers of scandal lingered circling one man in particular, Owen Caldwell, a brilliant but embattled biotech researcher. Owen, a white American with sharp blue eyes and a lean, athletic build, stood near the edge of the room, his jaw tight. His pale skin contrasted with the dark navy of his tailored suit, though the weight of recent accusations made him feel out of place in the glittering crowd. Just weeks ago, a rival, Sophia Langley, had leaked a report alleging his research on genetic therapies violated ethical boundaries. The claims were baseless, a calculated smear, but they'd cost him Grant's allies and his once sterling reputation. Tonight he was here to salvage what he could, to charm the right people, and rebuild his standing. But the stares and hushed murmurs followed him like shadows. Across the room, Kiera Thompson navigated the crowd with quiet grace. An African-American woman with deep ebony skin and tightly coiled hair swept into an elegant updo. She carried herself with a reserved poise that belied her role as a university librarian. Her emerald green dress hugged her frame, its subtle shimmer catching the light as she moved. Kiera was not one for galas. She preferred the solitude of the library's stacks, where books whispered truths no one could dispute. But her supervisor had insisted she attend, citing her knack for cataloging rare manuscripts as a talking point for donors. Reluctantly, she'd agreed, though she kept to the fringes, her dark eyes scanning the room for a quiet escape. Their paths crossed near a towering floral arrangement, where Owen, seeking respite from the judgmental gazes, nearly collided with Kiera as she stepped back from a donor's overzealous handshake. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, catching her elbow to steady her. His voice was low, tinged with a fatigue that matched the faint lines around his eyes. Kiera's lips curved into a small, polite smile. "No harm done," she replied, her tone warm, but guarded. She adjusted her glasses a habit when she felt exposed and studied him briefly. His pale complexion was flushed, likely from the champagne or the pressure of the evening, but there was a sincerity in his gaze that disarmed her. "I'm Owen," he said, extending a hand. "And I'm guessing you are not someone who enjoys these things." Kiera laughed softly, shaking his hand. Her dark and smooth skin contrasted with his lighter tone, a fleeting observation she pushed aside. "Kiera, and you're right. I'd rather be shelving books than dodging small talk." Their conversation sparked effortlessly. Owen, desperate for a distraction from his troubles, found Kiera's dry wit and quiet confidence refreshing. She spoke of her work archiving rare texts, her love for the stories hidden in faded ink, and her disdain for the university's politics. He, in turn, shared his passion for biotech, how he dreamed of curing diseases, not just treating them. He avoided mentioning the scandal, but Kiera, who'd overheard the gossip, didn't press. Instead, she listened, her eyes bright with curiosity, and for the first time that night, Owen felt seen, not judged. They drifted to a quieter corner near a window overlooking the Charles River, its surface glinting under the moonlight. The gala's noise faded as they talked about literature, science, and the small joys they found in their work. Kiera admitted she'd always wanted to write a book, something for children, but doubted she had the time or courage. Owen confessed he'd once played guitar in a college band, a detail that made her laugh, picturing him strumming in some dive bar. The hours slipped away, and their connection deepened, a fragile thread woven in a single night. But Sophia Langley, a sleek, calculating presence with sharp cheekbones and a cascade of blonde hair, watched from afar. Her pale skin glowed under the chandeliers, but her eyes were cold, fixed on Owen. She'd orchestrated his downfall precisely, and seeing him smile with Kiera, a woman she dismissed as inconsequential, ignited her resentment. Sophia had her own ambitions to lead the university's biotech initiative and secure a legacy. Owen's talent threatened that, and his charm only made him more dangerous. Kiera, she decided, was a liability. As the gala neared its end, Sophia seized her moment. She approached a group of influential donors, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "It's such a shame about Owen Caldwell," she said loud enough for nearby guests to overhear. "His research was promising, but those ethical violations. I heard he's been falsifying data for years." The lie spread like wildfire, and within minutes, Owen's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues pulling their support. A reporter cornered him demanding a statement. The room closed in, and Owen, overwhelmed, excused himself from Kiera with a hurried apology. "I have to go," he said, his voice strained. "I'll find you again, Kiera." She nodded, sensing the storm around him, but unsure of its cause. "Take care, Owen," she said softly, watching as he disappeared into the crowd. Sophia wasn't done. She intercepted Owen outside, her smile venomous. "You should have stayed down, Caldwell," she whispered. "This is my stage now." By morning, Owen was forced to leave Boston, his career in tatters, his promises to Kiera unspoken. Kiera, meanwhile, returned to her quiet life, unaware of the forces that had torn their night apart, or the life-changing secret it would leave behind. The days after the gala blurred into routine for Kiera. She shelved books, cataloged manuscripts, and tried to forget the spark she'd felt with Owen. But a month later, nausea and fatigue led her to a doctor's visit, and the news hit like a thunderbolt: she was pregnant. The night with Owen, a fleeting moment of vulnerability and connection, had left her with a responsibility she hadn't planned for. She tried to reach him, but his university email bounced. His phone was disconnected, and no one seemed to know where he'd gone. Alone, Kiera faced a choice. She chose to keep the baby, naming her Lila, which meant night in honor of the evening that changed everything. For Owen, the gala marked the start of a grueling exile. He moved to California, taking a low-profile job at a small biotech firm. The accusations followed him, but he worked tirelessly to clear his name, publishing papers, securing patents, and slowly rebuilding his reputation. Yet, in quiet moments, his thoughts drifted to Kiera, her laugh, her quiet strength, the way she'd made him feel human again. He wrote letters pouring out apologies and explanations, but they went unanswered, lost to Sophia's interference. Sophia, meanwhile, thrived in Owen's absence. She secured funding, published articles, and positioned herself as the face of ethical biotech. But her victory was hollow. She knew Owen's talent had outshone hers, and the memory of Kiera's quiet defiance at the gala gnawed at her. She filed Kiera's name away, a minor threat to be dealt with later. As the years passed, Kiera raised Lila in a modest apartment near the university. The little girl, with her mother's bright eyes and a curious mind, brought joy to Kiera's days, but also fear. The academic world was cutthroat, and Kiera worried that her daughter might one day be caught in its crosshairs. Now leading a biotech empire, Owen carried a different burden, a longing for the woman he'd lost, and a life he could only imagine. Their story, born in a single night, was far from over. As it often does, fate had plans to bring them back together, plans that would test their hearts and unravel the lies that had kept them apart. Kiera Thompson's life had settled into a rhythm as steady as the ticking of a library clock. Each morning she woke before dawn in her small Boston apartment, the scent of coffee mingling with the faint must of old books that clung to her clothes. Her days were spent at the university library, where she curated collections, answered queries from harried students, and maintained the quiet order of her domain. The library was her sanctuary, where chaos could be tamed with a Dewey Decimal number and a well-placed index card. But her true joy and deepest worry were Lila, her 7-year-old daughter, who filled her life with laughter and questions Kiera wasn't always ready to answer. Lila was a whirlwind of energy, with a knack for drawing intricate pictures and a habit of asking about the world in ways that left Kiera scrambling. "Why do stars twinkle?" she'd ask. "Who's my dad?" The latter question was always delivered with a tilt of her head, as if it were just another puzzle to solve. Kiera would deflect spinning tales of a brave, kind man who loved the stars, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. She'd tried to find Owen after the gala, but he'd vanished, leaving her to face motherhood alone. She didn't resent Lila, never that, but the weight of being both mother and father, of guarding her daughter from a world that could be cruel, was a constant pressure. The library was a haven, but wasn't immune to the university's politics. Kiera kept her head down, avoiding the gossip surrounding faculty rivalries and funding wars. Her colleagues respected her work, but some whispered about her reserved nature, mistaking it for aloofness. Kiera didn't care. She had Lila to protect, which meant steering clear of the drama that had once entangled her with Owen. She'd learned to distrust the academic elite, their smiles too sharp, their promises too slippery. Yet, she couldn't help but wonder about Owen, where he was, whether he'd ever thought of her, whether he'd survived the storm that had driven him away. Meanwhile, across the country in Silicon Valley, Owen Caldwell was no longer the disgraced researcher of 8 years ago. He'd clawed back, building a biotech empire that drew investors in headlines. His company, Helix Innovations, was pioneering genetic therapies, and his name was once again spoken with respect, not suspicion. But success hadn't erased the past. The gala night lingered in his memory, not for the scandal that followed, but for Kiera, her quiet laugh, the way she'd listened without judgment. He'd written to her letters filled with apologies and hopes, but they'd gone unanswered. He assumed she'd moved on, perhaps married, and her life was a closed book he'd never reread. Owen's days were a blur of meetings, lab reports, and late-night research, but his nights were quieter, haunted by what-ifs. He'd never married, never found anyone who matched the spark he'd felt with Kiera. His office, sleek and modern with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooked San Francisco Bay, but he often found himself staring east toward Boston, wondering about the woman he'd left behind. His success was a shield, but it couldn't protect him from the ache of regret. Back in Boston, Kiera's life revolved around Lila. In the mornings, there was a rush of braiding her daughter's hair, packing lunches, and dropping her off at school before heading to the library. Evenings were for stories, Lila curled up on the couch, listening as Kiera read from fairy tales or invented adventures about a girl who explored the stars. Lila's drawings covered their fridge, vivid sketches of imaginary worlds, and sometimes a shadowy figure she called the Starman, her child's interpretation of Kiera's vague stories about her father. Kiera cherished these moments, but they were tinged with fear. The university was a small world, and rumors had a way of resurfacing. What if Lila's parentage became a target for gossip? What if the past caught up with them? Kiera's fears weren't unfounded. Sophia Langley, now a prominent figure in biotech, hadn't forgotten the gala or the librarian who'd briefly stolen Owen's attention. Sophia's career had flourished, but her ambition was insatiable. She'd heard whispers of Owen's comeback and felt a familiar pang of envy. When she learned he was funding projects back in Boston, including a grant for the university library, her interest sharpened. Kiera, she remembered, worked there. The thought of Owen reconnecting with her was a threat Sophia couldn't ignore. Discreetly, she began to dig into Kiera's life, looking for leverage to maintain her dominance. Kiera, unaware of Sophia's renewed interest, focused on her work. The library was underfunded, its shelves sagging under the weight of aging books and outdated systems. When a grant proposal crossed her desk, promising new resources, she threw herself into it, unaware that the funding came from Owen's company. She spent late nights drafting budgets, envisioning a children's reading room where Lila could lose herself in stories. It was a dream born of love, but also of necessity. Lila was growing, and Kiera wanted her to have a world bigger than their cramped apartment. Owen, too, was unaware of the connection. The grant was one of many his company supported, a way to give back to the academic community that had once shunned him. He delegated the details to his team, his mind occupied with a new therapy trial that could save thousands of lives. But fate, as it often does, was weaving their paths together again. The grant approval meant a trip to Boston for the library's reopening ceremony, a formality Owen planned to skip until his assistant mentioned the library's lead curator, a woman named Kiera Thompson. The name stopped him cold. Could it be her? He'd thought of her so often, her face a constant in his dreams. But he'd convinced himself she was gone from his life. The possibility of seeing her again stirred something he hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with dread. What if she hated him for disappearing? What if she'd forgotten him entirely? He booked the trip, telling himself it was just business, but his heart raced at the thought of her. Kiera prepared for the ceremony in Boston, unaware of the storm brewing. Lila, now old enough to notice her mother's long hours, tagged along to the library, sketching in a corner while Kiera worked. The little girl's presence was a comfort and a reminder of the secret Kiera carried. She'd never told anyone about Owen, not even her closest friends. The gala night was a locked chapter, one she opened only in her quietest moments, when Lila slept and the apartment was still. As the ceremony approached, Kiera felt a strange unease. The library was her world, but it was also part of the university's web, where ambition and betrayal thrived. Sophia's shadow loomed, though Kiera didn't yet know it, and Owen's return was a spark waiting to ignite. 8 years of solitude had shaped them both. Kiera into a fiercely protective mother, Owen into a man driven by redemption. Their reunion, when it came, would be no simple meeting. It would be a collision of past and present love and loss, with Lila at its heart. The library at Boston University stood transformed, its once dusty halls now gleaming with polished wood and soft lighting. The grant from Helix Innovations had funded new shelves, a digital catalog system, and a cozy children's reading nook that Kiera had envisioned for years. Today was the grand reopening, a celebration marked by balloons, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and a crowd of faculty, donors, and curious students. Kiera moved through the event efficiently, directing staff, greeting guests, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Her emerald dress, simple but elegant, swayed as she navigated the bustling room, her glasses slipping slightly as she bent to adjust a display. Lila, her 7-year-old daughter, trailed close behind, clutching a sketchbook. The girl's eyes sparkled with excitement, darting from the new books to the colorful banners overhead. "Mom, can I draw the ribbon?" Lila asked, already flipping to a fresh page. Kiera smiled, smoothing her daughter's braids. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Just stay where I can see you." Lila nodded and settled at a small table near the children's section, her pencil dancing across the paper. Across the country, Owen Caldwell boarded a private jet bound for Boston. The decision to attend the ceremony had been impulsive, spurred by mentioning Kiera's name in his assistant's email. Helix Innovations had funded the library as part of its outreach, but Owen hadn't planned to visit until he saw her name. Now, as the jet hummed through the clouds, he stared out the window, his mind replaying that gala night 8 years ago. Kiera's laugh, her sharp wit, how she'd made him forget the weight of his world for a few hours. It all felt like a dream he'd never recaptured. He adjusted his tie, a nervous habit, and wondered what he'd say if he saw her. Would she even remember him? The library buzzed with anticipation as the ceremony began. Kiera stood near the podium, half listening to the university president's speech about innovation and community. Her focus was on Lila, who was now sketching the crowd, her small frame hunched over her book. Kiera's heart swelled with pride, but also unease. Events like this drew attention, and attention brought risks. She'd worked hard to keep her life private, shielding Lila from the academic world's gossip. The thought of someone digging into her past, or Lila's, made her stomach twist. Owen arrived late, slipping into the back of the crowd as the speeches droned on. The library was impressive, its modern upgrades blending seamlessly with its historic charm. He scanned the room, his pulse quickening when he spotted Kiera near the front. She was as he remembered, graceful, composed, her presence commanding despite her quiet demeanor. He hesitated, unsure whether to approach, when his gaze fell on a little girl at a nearby table. She was drawing her head tilted in concentration, and something about her eyes stopped him cold. They were Kiera's eyes, bright and curious, but with a spark that felt familiar. The ceremony ended, and the crowd dispersed into mingling. Kiera circulated, thanking donors and answering questions about the new systems. Lila, growing restless, wandered closer to her mother, holding up her sketch. "Look, Mom, it's the library." The drawing was vibrant with bold lines depicting the shelves and a bright red ribbon across the entrance. Kiera knelt, praising her daughter's work, unaware of Owen watching from across the room. He approached slowly, his heart pounding. "Kiera." His voice was tentative, almost lost in the chatter. She turned, and for a moment time froze. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by a flicker of something else, shock perhaps, or fear. "Owen?" She said, her tone steady but guarded. "It's been a long time." "It has," he replied, searching her face for a hint of warmth. "I didn't know you'd be here. I mean, I hoped, but—" He trailed off, glancing at Lila, who was staring at him with open curiosity. "Is this your daughter?" Kiera's hand tightened on Lila's shoulder. "This is Lila," she said, her voice softening as she looked at her daughter. "Lila, say hi to Mr. Caldwell." Lila waved shyly, clutching her sketchbook. Owen crouched to her level, smiling. "That's a great drawing, Lila. You've got a real talent." "Thanks," Lila beamed, holding up the sketch. "It's the library. Mom says it's like a castle for books." Owen chuckled, but his mind was racing. Something about Lila, the shape of her smile and the way her eyes crinkled, stirred a question he didn't dare voice. He stood, turning back to Kiera. "Can we talk somewhere quieter?" Kiera hesitated. The library was her domain, but Owen's presence felt like a crack in its foundation. Still, she nodded, leading him to a small office behind the circulation desk. Lila stayed with a colleague, happily sketching. Inside the office, Kiera crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What are you doing here, Owen? I thought you left Boston for good." "I did," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But I've been rebuilding. Helix Innovations. My company funded this project. I didn't know you were involved until a few days ago." He paused, searching her eyes. "Kiera, I tried to reach you after the gala. I wrote and called, but you never answered." Kiera frowned, confused. "I never got anything. You just disappeared." Her voice held a trace of hurt, quickly masked. "Things happened, Owen. Life moved on." He nodded, sensing the weight of her words, but not pressing. "I'm sorry for everything. That night meant something to me, and I didn't want to leave you like that." His sincerity disarmed her, but before she could respond, a staff member knocked, calling her back to the event. "We'll talk later," she said, slipping out her heart racing. Owen lingered watching Lila as she showed her drawing to another guest. The resemblance gnawed at him, a puzzle he couldn't solve. He rejoined the crowd, mingling with donors, but his thoughts stayed with Kiera and the little girl, who might be more than a stranger's daughter. Kiera felt the weight of Owen's return as the event wound down. She'd built a life without him, a fortress for her and Lila, but his presence threatened to unravel it. What if he asked questions about Lila? What if the truth came out? She glanced at her daughter, now laughing with the librarian, and resolved to keep her guard up. The past was dangerous, and she wouldn't let it touch her future. But fate had other plans. As Owen left the library, he passed a display of children's artwork, including Lila's sketch. A small label read, "Lila Thompson, age 7. He froze doing the math. 8 years since the gala. 7 years old. The pieces didn't yet fit, but the question burned brighter: was Lila his? The weeks following the library reopening were a storm of emotions for Kiera. Owen's return had cracked open a door she'd long kept locked, and the questions it raised threatened to upend her carefully ordered life. She threw herself into work, cataloging new arrivals and training staff on the digital system. But her thoughts kept drifting to that brief conversation in the office. Owen's sincerity and confusion about her silence after the gala stirred doubts she couldn't ignore. Had she misjudged him? Or was he just a ghost from a past best forgotten? Lila, oblivious to her mother's turmoil, chattered about the reopening her sketch now framed in the children's nook. "Mr. Caldwell liked my drawing," she said one evening, sprawled on the living room floor with her crayons. Kiera forced a smile, her heart tightening. "That's nice, sweetheart," she replied, stirring a pot of macaroni. She wanted to protect Lila from the chaos Owen's presence might bring, but the girl's curiosity was relentless. "Is he coming back, Mom? He was nice." Kiera didn't answer, changing the subject to homework, but Lila's question lingered, echoing her own fears. Owen's company was now a major donor, meaning he'd likely return for future events. She couldn't avoid him forever, and the thought of facing him again, knowing what she knew about Lila, made her stomach churn. Owen, back in California, was equally unsettled. The image of Lila's eyes haunted him, their familiarity tugging at memories of the gala night. He'd spent years rebuilding his life, but seeing Kiera had reopened old wounds. Why hadn't she answered his letters? Had she chosen to cut him out, or was there more to the story? And Lila, her age. Her smile raised a possibility he couldn't shake. He buried himself in work, overseeing a new trial for a cancer therapy. But his nights were spent researching Kiera's life, piecing together what he could from public records. She was a single mother, never married, and Lila's birth date aligned too closely with that night to be a coincidence. His suspicions grew, but so did his anger. If Lila was his, why had Kiera kept her from him? Was it revenge for his sudden departure? The thought festered, clouding his judgment. He booked another trip to Boston, determined to confront her and understand. He wanted to believe Kiera wasn't vindictive, but the silence of 8 years suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, Sophia Langley sensed an opportunity. She'd attended the library, reopening her presence unnoticed by Kiera or Owen. Seeing them together, even briefly, reignited her old resentment. Owen's success threatened her dominance in biotech, and Kiera, with her quiet competence, was an unexpected variable. Sophia's spies colleagues she'd cultivated over the years reported Kiera's role in securing the grant and her growing influence in the library. To Sophia, this was a challenge. She began spreading whispers, subtle at first, questioning Kiera's qualifications. A librarian running a major renovation, she'd say to donors, her tone dripping with skepticism. Surely someone with more experience should lead. The rumors reached Kiera indirectly through a colleague's hesitant warning. "People are talking," the colleague said, avoiding her eyes. They're saying you might be in over your head. Kiera's jaw tightened, but she brushed it off, focusing on her work. She'd faced skepticism before academia was ruthless to those who didn't play its games, but with Owen's return the timing felt too pointed to be random. She suspected Sophia, though she had no proof. The thought of losing her job, her stability, terrified her. Lila depended on her, and the library was their lifeline. Owen arrived in Boston unannounced, requesting a meeting with the library's director to discuss future funding. Kiera was called in, unaware of his presence, until she entered the director's office and saw him seated, his expression unreadable. "Kiera," he said, standing. "I didn't mean to ambush you." The director, sensing tension, excused himself, leaving them alone. Kiera crossed her arms, her voice low. "What do you want, Owen? You can't just show up like this." "I need answers," he said, his tone sharper than intended. "About Lila. About why you never told me." The accusation hung heavy, and Kiera's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Told you what?" she asked, though. Her voice trembled, betraying her. "Please don't play games," he snapped, his frustration spilling over. "She's 7. The gala was 8 years ago. I'm not stupid, Kiera. Is she mine?" Kiera's heart pounded. She dreaded this moment, but his anger caught her off guard. "You disappeared," she shot back. "You left without a word. I tried to find you, but you were gone. What was I supposed to do?" "You could have tried harder," he said, his voice breaking. "If she's my daughter, I have a right to know." The words cut deep, and Kiera's eyes filled with tears. She refused to let fall. "You think I wanted this," she said. "To raise her alone, to wonder every day if I was enough. You don't get to judge me, Owen." The argument spiraled, each word a wound born of misunderstanding. Owen saw betrayal. Kiera saw abandonment. They parted without resolution. Kiera storming out to collect Lila from daycare. Owen staring at the empty office, regretting his harshness, but unable to let go of his questions. Sophia, meanwhile, escalated her campaign. She leaked a memo to the university board, suggesting Kiera had mismanaged grant funds. The claim was vague, easily debunked, but it sowed doubt. Kiera's supervisor called her in her face grim. "We're reviewing the budget," she said. "Just a formality, but—" "Be careful, Kiera." The warning was clear. Her job was at risk. That night, Kiera sat with Lila, reading a bedtime story, her mind elsewhere. She'd built a life for them, fragile, but hers. Owen's accusations, Sophia's rumors, they threatened to tear it apart. She kissed Lila's forehead, whispering, "We'll be okay," but the words felt hollow. Back at his hotel, Owen stared at a photo of Lila's sketch he'd snapped at the library. The truth was close, but so was the fracture between them. Neither knew Sophia's next move would push them all to the edge. The air in Kiera's small apartment was thick with the scent of chamomile tea, a nightly ritual meant to calm her nerves. She sat at the kitchen table, papers strewn before her, budget reports, grant proposals, anything to refute the whispers threatening her job at the library. Lila slept in the next room, her sketchbook open to a new drawing, a man with a vague, shadowy face labeled Starman in childish scrawl. Kiera's heart clenched at the sight. The image was a reminder of the secret she'd carried for years now, dangerously close to surfacing since Owen's confrontation. Owen, meanwhile, paced his Boston hotel room, the city skyline a blur beyond the window. His argument with Kiera had left him raw, his anger giving way to doubt. Had he been too quick to accuse her? The timeline of Lila's birth gnawed at him, a puzzle he couldn't ignore. He'd done the math 8 years ago. The gala. Lila was 7 years old. The coincidence was too stark. He opened his laptop, pulling up public records again, but they offered no clarity. Just Kiera's name, address, and Lila's birth certificate. which listed no father. He needed proof, not assumptions, but demanding it felt invasive wrong. At the library, Kiera's days grew heavier. Sophia's rumors had taken root, and colleagues now eyed her with subtle suspicion. The budget review loomed, and though Kiera's records were meticulous, the scrutiny exhausted her. She kept Lila close, letting her daughter spend afternoons in the children's nook, hoping the routine would anchor them both. One day, Lila showed her a new drawing, a family under a starry sky, the Starman, now with blue eyes and a faint smile. "Is this what my dad looks like?" Lila asked, her voice innocent but piercing. Kiera froze, her throat tight. "Maybe," she said softly, brushing a braid from Lila's face. "He liked stars like you." It was the truth, or part of it, but the weight of Owen's possible claim pressed harder. She hadn't lied during their argument. She'd tried to find him after the gala, but his absence had been absolute. With him back, she feared what the truth might mean for Lila. Would he demand custody? Pull her into his glittering, unstable world? The thought of losing her daughter was unbearable. Owen, driven by the same question, took a calculated risk. He contacted a discreet lab, one Helix Innovations often used, and arranged for a DNA test. He didn't have Lila's sample yet, but he secured one of his own, a precaution. The idea of sneaking a sample from Lila, a hairbrush, a straw, felt wrong, but his need for certainty overrode his guilt. He revisited the library this time, under the pretense of reviewing the grant's impact. Kiera was there, organizing a display of rare manuscripts. She greeted him coolly, her guard up. "Owen," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Didn't expect you back so soon." "I wanted to see the progress," he replied, his tone neutral. "And to apologize. I was out of line last time." His sincerity caught her off guard, but she nodded, wary. They walked through the library, discussing the new systems, but Owen's eyes drifted to Lila, who was reading in a corner. Her book, a science primer about constellations, made him smile. "She's bright," he said, almost to himself. Kiera's jaw tightened. "She is," she said, steering the conversation back to work. But as they passed Lila's table, Owen noticed her sketchbook open to the Starman drawing. The blue eyes and vague outline hit him like a punch. "Did she draw this?" he asked, his voice low. Kiera hesitated, then nodded. "She's always drawing. It's her way of making sense of things." Owen's gaze lingered on the sketch, his mind racing. He didn't push further, but the drawing was a catalyst. That night, he returned to his hotel and called the lab, arranging for a discreet way to obtain Lila's DNA, a cup she'd used at the library's refreshment table, collected by a trusted colleague. The ethics of it gnawed at him, but the need to know was more substantial. Days later, the results arrived. Owen sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the email, a 99.9% match. Lila was his daughter. The truth settled like a stone, heavy with joy and regret. He'd missed 7 years of her life unaware, while Kiera had carried the burden alone. His anger at her faded, replaced by a need to make things right. But how? He couldn't just walk into their lives after how he'd confronted her. Kiera, unaware of the test, was grappling with her own fears. The budget review had cleared her of wrongdoing, but Sophia's whispers persisted, suggesting Kiera's personal life was distracting. The pressure was mounting, and Kiera felt it closing in. One evening, as she tucked Lila into bed, her daughter asked, "Why don't we have a dad like other kids?" The question, so direct, broke Kiera's resolve. She sat on the edge of the bed, her voice trembling. "I need to tell you something," she began. "Your dad. He's someone I met a long time ago. We lost touch, but he's a good man. I think he'd love you if he knew you." It was the most she'd ever said, and Lila's eyes widened, absorbing the words. Kiera stopped short of naming Owen, afraid of what it might unleash. The next day, Owen requested another meeting. Kiera agreed, meeting him in a quiet cafe near the library. The air was tense, but Owen's demeanor was softer, almost pleading. "Kiera, I know the truth," he said, his voice low. "Lila's my daughter. I had a test done. I'm sorry for going behind your back. I had to know." Kiera's breath caught anger and fear colliding. "You had no right," she whispered, her hands shaking. "She's my daughter, Owen. I've raised her alone. You don't get to claim her. I'm not trying to take her," he said, leaning forward. "I want to be part of her life. I want to help to make up for the years I didn't know. Please, Kiera. I didn't leave you on purpose. I was forced out and I thought you didn't want me." Tears welled in Kiera's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I tried to find you," she said. "I was alone, pregnant, with no idea where you'd gone. I did what I had to do for her." The confession hung between them, raw and fragile. Owen reached for her hand, but she pulled back, standing. "I need time," she said, leaving him in the cafe, her heart torn between relief and terror. As Kiera walked home, Lila's drawing flashed in her mind. The starman with Owen's eyes. The truth was out, but the path forward was uncertain. She feared losing Lila to Owen's world, a place of wealth and power she couldn't match. But for the first time, she also wondered if Owen could be the father Lila deserved, if only they could navigate the wreckage of their past. The library, once Kiera's sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Sophia Langley's campaign against her had intensified, moving beyond whispers to tangible threats. A critical drug trial at Helix Innovations, one of Owen's flagship projects, had failed spectacularly, with data leaks pointing to sabotage. Ever the opportunist, Sophia spread rumors that Kiera, with her access to university networks, had leaked sensitive information to competitors. The accusation was baseless, but it gained traction among faculty who saw Kiera's connection to Owen as a liability. Kiera felt the walls closing in. Her supervisor called her into a meeting. Her tone clipped. "The board is concerned about the leaks," she said. "Your names come up, Kiera. I don't believe it, but you need to be careful." Kiera nodded, her stomach churning. She'd spent years building a reputation for integrity, and now it was unraveling because of a woman she barely knew. She kept Lila from the library, sending her to a friend's house after school, afraid the rumors might reach her daughter's ears. Owen, meanwhile, was consumed by the trial's failure. The leaked data had cost millions and delayed a therapy that could save lives. His team traced the breach to an internal server, but the trail ended there, cleverly masked. He suspected Sophia. She'd been too quick to capitalize on the disaster, publishing an op-ed questioning Helix's security protocols. But proving her involvement was another matter. His focus split between the company and his newfound role as Lila's father, a role he was still navigating. After his confession to Kiera, they agreed to cautious steps. He'd meet Lila as a friend to avoid overwhelming her. Their first meeting was at a park near Kiera's apartment. Lila, clutching her sketchbook, eyed Owen curiously as he sat on a bench with a book about planets. "Mom says you like stars," Lila said, sitting beside him. Owen smiled, his heart swelling. "I do. Want to learn about constellations?" Lila nodded eagerly, and they spent an hour flipping through the book, Owen pointing out Orion and Ursa Major. Kiera watched from a distance, her emotions tangled. Gratitude for Owen's gentleness, fear of what it might cost. The fragile peace was shattered. Days later. Late one evening, when an alarm blared, Kiera was working alone in the library, updating records. Smoke filled the air, acrid and thick as sprinklers hissed to life. She grabbed her bag and ran for the exit, her heart pounding. Outside, firefighters declared it a false alarm, a smoke bomb, not a fire, but the damage was done. Books were soaked, systems shorted out, and the library faced weeks of repairs. Kiera, shaken, called a friend to check on Lila, who was safe at home. But the incident felt personal, a warning. Owen heard about the fire from a university contact and drove to the library immediately. He found Kiera outside, soaked and shivering, talking to a firefighter. "Are you okay?" he asked, draping his coat over her shoulders. She nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "This wasn't an accident," she whispered. "Someone's targeting me." Owen's jaw tightened. He suspected Sophia, but had no proof. "Come with me," he said, guiding her to his car. "You and Lila aren't safe here." Kiera resisted, her independence flaring, but the thought of Lila in danger changed her mind. They drove to her apartment where Lila was waiting, confused but unharmed. Owen knelt beside her, forcing a smile. "Hey, kiddo, want to stay at a fancy hotel tonight? Like an adventure?" Lila's eyes lit up, and Kiera, exhausted, agreed. Owen set them up at the hotel in a suite, ordering room service and ensuring security. Kiera, still shaken, watched Lila draw in the living room, her mind racing. "Why would someone do this?" she asked Owen, her voice low. He hesitated, then shared his suspicions about Sophia. "She's been after me for years," he said. "And now you're caught in it because of me." Kiera shook her head. "This isn't your fault, but we need to stop her." Her resolve hardened the librarian in her awakening. She knew how to find information to uncover truths buried in records. If Sophia were behind this, there'd be a trail. Owen, moved by her determination, vowed to protect them. He called his team, tasking them with digging into Sophia's connections, while Kiera planned to search the library's archives for anything linking Sophia to past misconduct. As Lila slept, Kiera and Owen sat in the dim light of the suite, a fragile alliance forming. The danger had united them, but the shadow of Sophia's schemes loomed larger. The library incident was a warning, and neither knew how far Sophia would go to keep her power, or what it would cost to stop her. The hotel suite was a quiet cocoon, its soft lighting casting long shadows across the room. Kiera sat at a small desk, her laptop open, while Lila slept soundly in the next room, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. Owen paced near the window, his phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with his team at Helix Innovations. The library's smoke bomb incident had shaken them and forged a tentative alliance. Kiera's fear for Lila's safety and Owen's determination to protect them had pushed their personal conflicts to the background, at least for now. The real enemy was Sophia Langley, and the truth about her schemes lay buried in the past, a past Kiera and Owen were now determined to unearth. Kiera's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the university's digital archives. Her years as a librarian had honed her ability to navigate labyrinthine records, and she suspected Sophia's meticulous nature would have left a trail, however faint. "If she's been sabotaging you for years," Kiera said, glancing at Owen, "there's got to be something. Emails, memos, anything that shows her hand." Owen nodded, ending his call. "My team's looking into her financials and contacts at Helix. But she's careful. Always has been." He sat across from Kiera, his expression a mix of frustration and resolve. "After the gala, I sent you letters, dozens of them. I thought you'd ignored me, but now I'm unsure." Kiera's hands paused on the keyboard, her eyes narrowing. "Letters, Owen. I never got anything. Not a single one." The revelation hit her like a gust of cold air. She'd spent years believing he'd abandoned her, but what if someone Sophia had ensured those letters never reached her? The idea ignited a spark of anger and a flicker of hope. Maybe Owen hadn't chosen to disappear. "We need to find them," Owen said, his voice firm. "If Sophia intercepted them, they could prove she's been manipulating things from the start." He leaned closer, watching Kiera work. Where would you even start looking for something like that? The university's mail archives, Kiera replied, her tone clipped with focus. They keep records of faculty correspondence, especially from high-profile events like the gala. If your letters were sent to my work address, they might still be there, misfiled, redirected, or destroyed. She dove deeper into the database, her librarian's instincts guiding her through outdated servers and forgotten folders. Hours passed, and the city outside settled into a quiet night. Kiera's search yielded a log from 8 years ago, noting a batch of redirected mail from Owen's university account. The destination was an administrative office, one Sophia had access to as a rising star in the biotech department. Kiera's pulse quickened. This could be it, she said, pointing to the screen. The office was supposed to forward mail, but there's no record of it leaving. Owen leaned in, his jaw tight. Sophia was close to the dean back then. She could have pulled strings to bury them. He stood pacing again. We need to get into that office. Physically. Digital records won't be enough. Kiera hesitated. Breaking into an office was a risk, especially with her job being scrutinized. But the thought of Sophia's schemes stealing years from her Owen and Lila pushed her forward. Tomorrow, she said after hours. I have the library's keys, and that office is nearby. We'll look. The next evening, under the cover of dusk, Kiera and Owen slipped into the university's administrative wing. The halls were silent, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and wax polish. Kiera's keys jangled softly as she unlocked the office, a cramped room filled with filing cabinets and dusty boxes. Owen held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dimness as they searched. Kiera's expertise guided them, her fingers skimming labels until she found a box marked Undelivered Mail, 2017. Inside were envelopes, yellowed with time, some addressed to her in Owen's precise handwriting. She opened one, her breath catching as she read his words. Apologies for leaving explanations of the scandal, promises to find her again. You didn't lie, she whispered, her voice breaking. Owen stood beside her, his eyes glistening as he read another letter. I thought you'd moved on, he said. I thought I'd lost you. The discovery was a wound and a balm, revealing Sophia's betrayal and their lost connection. Kiera clutched the letters, her resolve hardening. We'll use these, she said. They prove she interfered, but we need to tie her more closely to the library incident and the data leak. Their search was cut short by footsteps in the hall. Kiera shoved the letters into her bag and they slipped out, hearts pounding. Back at the hotel, they pored over the letters, each one a piece of their fractured past. Lila woke briefly, wandering into the room. What are those? She asked, rubbing her eyes. Just old letters, Kiera said, forcing a smile. Go back to bed, sweetheart. Lila nodded, but her gaze lingered on Owen, who offered a gentle wave. After she left, Kiera turned to him. She's starting to trust you, she said. Don't break that. I won't. Owen promised, his voice steady. I want to be her father, Kiera. Not just in name. I want to be there for her, for both of you. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Kiera didn't respond, but the letters in her hands felt like a bridge, however fragile, to a future they might rebuild. The next day, Owen took Lila to the library while Kiera worked. He sat with her in his children's nook, reading a book about space exploration. His voice warm as he answered her endless questions. Do you think there's life on Mars? Lila asked, her eyes wide. Maybe, Owen said, smiling. Scientists like me are trying to find out. Lila grinned, her trust in him growing, and for a moment Owen felt like a father, not just a stranger with a secret. Kiera watched from a distance, her heart softening despite her fears. But the letters now hidden in her office reminded her of the fight ahead. Sophia's shadow was long, and the truth was only half uncovered. The stakes were higher now. The letters proved Sophia's interference 8 years ago, but tying her to the recent library incident and Helix's data leak required more. Kiera and Owen worked in tandem, and their days of research and strategy were a blur. Kiera scoured the library's archives, looking for any record of Sophia's past misconduct, while Owen's team dug into her professional network, seeking cracks in her polished facade. The hotel suite became their war room, with papers and laptops scattered across the table. Lila's drawings contrast the tension. One evening, as Kiera cross-referenced old grant proposals, a name caught her eye: Dr. Elena Martinez, a former colleague of Owen's who'd left Helix abruptly 5 years ago. Kiera remembered her vaguely a quiet, principled scientist who'd clashed with Sophia over research ethics. Owen. Kiera called, pointing to the screen. Elena might know something. She was at Helix when Sophia was rising. Maybe she saw something we can use. Owen's eyes lit up. Elena was loyal to me, but left after a falling out with the board. I never got the whole story. He reached out to her through a mutual contact, and to their surprise, Elena agreed to meet. She was in Boston working at a small research institute, and her response was curt, but promising. I have things to say about Langley. Name the place. They met at a quiet diner near the waterfront, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. Elena, sharp-eyed and reserved, slid into the booth across from them. I heard about the library, she said, her voice low. And the Helix leak. Sophia's behind it, isn't she? Owen nodded, leaning forward. We think so, but we need proof. What do you know? Elena hesitated, then pulled a USB drive from her pocket. This is what got me pushed out, she said. Emails, memos, and financial records. Sophia was working with a silent partner, a shareholder named Victor Crane. He's been funding her side projects, including some shady ones to undermine competitors like you. Kiera's pulse quickened. Crane. He's on the university board, isn't he? Elena nodded. He's been trying to take over Helix for years. Sophia's his pawn, but she's ambitious enough to think she's in control. The USB drive contained evidence of Sophia's data manipulation, altered trial results from a decade ago buried to secure her grants. It wasn't enough to tie her to the recent incidents, but it was a start. Back at the hotel, Kiera took the lead, her librarian skills shining. She cross-referenced Crane's name with university records, finding a trail of donations linked to Sophia's projects. One document buried in an obscure archive showed Crane redirecting funds to an offshore account after the gala, when Owen's letters vanished. This connects them, Kiera said, her voice triumphant. Sophia didn't act alone. Owen was impressed, but cautious. We need to be careful. Crane's powerful, and Sophia's desperate. If they know we're onto them, they'll hit harder. He glanced at Lila, playing nearby, and his resolve strengthened. We can't let them near her. Kiera agreed, her protective instincts flaring. She spent the next day digging through old financial ledgers in the library's special collections. Her expertise uncovered a hidden gem, a memo from Sophia to Crane, dated a year after the gala, hinting at cleaning up loose ends in the biotech department. It wasn't explicit, but paired with Elena's evidence, it painted a damning picture. Meanwhile, Owen met with his board, presenting Elena's findings to secure their support. He also hired a private investigator to track Crane's recent movements, hoping to link him to the library incident. The investigator found security footage from a nearby building, showing a figure planting the smoke bomb, a hired operative traceable to Crane through a shell company. As the evidence mounted, Kiera and Owen grew closer, their shared purpose bridging the gap of years. One night, as Lila slept, Kiera showed Owen a photo album, Lila's first steps, her kindergarten graduation moments he'd missed. "I want you to know her," Kiera said, her voice soft. "But we have to finish this first." Owen nodded, his hand brushing hers. "We will. Together." The alliance with Elena had given them an edge, but Sophia and Crane were formidable. With its ivy-covered halls and hidden agendas, Boston was their battlefield, and the fight for truth, and Lila was far from over. The autumn air in Boston carried a crisp edge, the leaves along Beacon Hill, glowing amber and crimson under the streetlights. Kiera and Owen had settled into a temporary routine at the hotel, their days consumed by the hunt for evidence against Sophia Langley and Victor Crane. Blissfully unaware of the stakes, Lila spent her evenings drawing or reading with Owen, her trust in him growing with each story he shared about the stars or his biotech work. The suite, once a sterile refuge, now felt like a fragile home filled with Lila's laughter and the quiet tension between Kiera and Owen as they navigated their past and present. Kiera sat at the desk, surrounded by printouts of financial records and old emails, her glasses slipping as she traced connections between Crane and Sophia. The evidence was mounting: Elena's USB drive, the intercepted letters, the memo about loose ends, but it wasn't enough to conclusively tie them to the library smoke bomb or the Helix data leak. Kiera's librarian instincts drove her to dig deeper, but her heart was heavy with a different burden: the fear of losing the life she'd built. Owen's presence, once a threat, was now a comfort, but it also stirred doubts. Could she share Lila with him, without losing her own place as her daughter's anchor? Owen, too, was wrestling with his own turmoil. Each moment with Lila, her curious questions, her quick smile deepened the ache of the years he'd missed. He sat on the suite's couch, flipping through Lila's photo album, a gift from Kiera, to help him know his daughter. The images: Lila's first birthday, her wobbly steps in a park, her grinning in a tiny graduation cap, were a bittersweet reminder of what Sophia's schemes had stolen. Guilt gnawed at him, not just for his absence, but for the life he'd built in California, one of wealth and isolation that felt so distant from Kiera's modest, love-filled world. One evening as Lila slept, Kiera and Owen found themselves alone in the suite's small living area, the city's glow filtering through the curtains. Kiera poured tea, her movements deliberate, avoiding Owen's gaze. "You're good with her," she said finally, her voice soft but guarded. "Lila. She lights up when you read to her." Owen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've missed so much," he said, his voice low. "Her whole life, Kiera. I didn't even know she existed. I keep thinking about all the moments I wasn't there for her first words and day of school. It kills me." Kiera set her cup down, her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't keep her from you to hurt you," she said. "I thought you were gone. I thought you didn't want us." The words carried years of pain, and Owen leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "I know that now," he said. "Those letters. I poured my heart into them. I thought you'd moved on, built a life without me. But finding out about Lila, about what Sophia did, it's like losing you twice." He paused, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you again. Either of you." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Kiera's chest tightened, torn between the warmth of his words and the fear of what they meant. "I've been alone for so long," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lila's my world. I don't know how to let someone else in, especially someone with your life, the money, the power. It's not my world, Owen. I'm afraid it'll swallow us." Owen nodded, understanding her fear. "I don't want to take anything from you," he said. "I want to be part of it, to be a father to Lila, to be whatever you'll let me be." The vulnerability in his voice disarmed her, and for a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their shared past and uncertain future pressing down. The next day, Kiera returned to the library, determined to find the final piece of evidence. She combed through old board meeting minutes, her expertise uncovering a buried reference to a payment Crane had authorized to a security firm, the same one linked to the smoke bomb operative. It wasn't definitive, but it was close. She texted Owen, who was meeting with his private investigator, to review new footage. The pieces fell into place, but the danger felt closer than ever. That evening, they took Lila to a small bookstore on Beacon Hill, a rare moment of normalcy. The shop's shelves were lined with worn paperbacks and new releases, the air rich with the scent of ink and wood. Lila darted to the children's section, pulling out a book about constellations. Owen followed, kneeling beside her, as she pointed out her favorite stars. Kiera watched from a distance, her heart softening at the sight. For the first time, she imagined a future where Owen was part of their lives, not as a threat, but as a partner. But the moment was fleeting. As they left the bookstore, Kiera's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "Stop digging, or Lila pays." Her blood ran cold, and she showed Owen, who immediately called his security team. "We're not backing down," he said, his jaw tight. "But we need to be smarter. They're scared, Kiera. That means we're close." They sat Lila down at the hotel, explaining gently that they needed to be careful. "We're like detectives," Owen said, forcing a smile and solving a mystery to keep everyone safe. Lila nodded, her trust in them unwavering, but Kiera's fear deepened. The bookstore, the library, their home, nowhere felt safe. Yet as Owen's hand brushed hers in that quiet moment, Kiera felt a spark of courage. They were in this together, and for Lila, they would fight. The night ended with Kiera and Owen poring over their evidence, their shared purpose, a fragile thread holding them together. The bookstore's warmth lingered in Kiera's mind, a reminder of what they could have if they survived Sophia's schemes. But the anonymous threat was a shadow, a warning that their fight was far from over, and the cost of truth might be higher than either could bear. Boston's Heinz Convention Center buzzed with anticipation, its sleek halls filled with scientists, investors, and journalists, gathered for the annual Biotech Innovation Summit. The event was a pinnacle of the industry, where breakthroughs were unveiled and reputations cemented or destroyed. Owen Caldwell stood backstage, his tie loosened, reviewing his keynote slides. Helix Innovations was set to present a new gene therapy, a project that could redefine its legacy. But the weight of this past week, Sophia's sabotage, the threats to Kiera and Lila made the stakes personal. Tonight, he and Kiera planned to expose Sophia and Victor Crane, using the evidence they'd painstakingly gathered. Kiera was in the audience, her librarians calm, masking a racing heart. She wore a simple navy dress, her glasses catching the stage lights as she scanned the crowd. Lila was safe with a trusted friend, which was a precaution after the anonymous threat. Kiera clutched a folder of documents, Elena's emails, the intercepted letters, the memo linking Crane to the security firm. It was enough to discredit Sophia, but only if they could present it before she struck. Owen had warned her that Sophia was planning something big, a final blow to bury him. The summit began with a flurry of speeches, each speaker touting medical advances. Owen's keynote was the centerpiece, and as he took the stage, the room fell silent. His presence was commanding, his voice steady, as he outlined Helix's vision. But midway through, the screens behind him flickered, replaced by a video. Sophia's voice filled the hall, accusing Owen of falsifying data, bribing regulators, and endangering lives. The footage was expertly edited, splicing old interviews with fabricated documents, painting Owen as a fraud. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, Kiera's stomach dropped, recognizing Sophia's handiwork. She stood pushing through the aisle to the tech booth, where she'd arranged to have their evidence ready. Owen, unfazed, paused his presentation. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cutting through the chaos, "this is a desperate attempt to discredit me, but we have the truth." Kiera reached the booth and handed the technician their USB drive. "Play this now," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The screens shifted again, displaying Elena's emails, the memo about Crane's payments, and scans of Owen's lost letters. Kiera took the microphone, her voice steady despite her nerves. She said these documents prove a coordinated effort to sabotage Helix Innovations and its founder. Sophia Langley and Victor Crane have manipulated data-stolen correspondence and endangered lives to protect their interests. The crowd gasped as the evidence unfolded. Financial trails, intercepted letters, and security footage linking Crane to the library incident. Sophia, seated near the front, stood, her face a mask of fury. "This is slander," she shouted, but the crowd's murmurs drowned her voice. Journalists scribbled furiously, and investors whispered to their aides. Owen stepped forward, his gaze locking on Sophia. "You've spent years trying to bury me," he said, "but the truth doesn't stay buried." Kiera continued, detailing how Sophia had redirected Owen's letters, sabotaged his research, and orchestrated the library's smoke bomb to intimidate her. The intercepted letters shown on the screen were a gut punch to the audience, revealing a personal betrayal that humanized Owen's fight. As the final piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between Crane and the security firm played. Sophia bolted for the exit, only to be stopped by security guards Owen had alerted. The hall erupted in applause, not for spectacle, but for justice. Owen and Kiera stood together, the weight of their victory sinking in. Journalists swarmed, demanding interviews, but Owen waved them off, turning to Kiera. "You were incredible," he said, his voice low, meant only for her. She smiled, exhaustion and relief mingling. "We did it together," she said. As the summit continued, Sophia was escorted out backstage, her career in ruins. Crane, implicated by the evidence, faced immediate scrutiny from the university board and Helix's investors. Owen's reputation, battered for years, was restored, and Helix's stock soared. But for Kiera, the victory was personal. The library was safe, her job secure, and Lila was protected from Sophia's reach. Later that night at the hotel, Kiera and Owen sat with Lila, who'd returned from her friend's house, oblivious to the drama. She showed them a new drawing, a family under a starry sky, the starman, now clearly Owen, holding her hand. "Is this us?" she asked, her voice hopeful. Owen glanced at Kiera, who nodded slightly. "Yeah, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. "It's us." The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of their journey, a family forged by truth and trust. The summit had been their battlefield, and they'd won, but the scars of their fight lingered, a reminder that their story was still unfolding. The echoes of the Biotech Innovation Summit still reverberated through Boston's academic and scientific communities. Sophia Langley's downfall was the talk of the town, her carefully curated reputation shattered by the evidence Kiera and Owen had presented. Victor Crane, her silent partner, faced investigations from the university board and Helix Innovations investors, his influence crumbling under the weight of exposed corruption. The victory restored his name for Owen, a vindication of years spent fighting baseless accusations. For Kiera, it was a reclamation of her peace, a shield for Lila against the chaos threatening their lives. Yet, as the dust settled, both knew their journey was far from over. Triumph had brought them together, but trust would determine their future. Kiera returned to the library with a renewed sense of purpose. The damage from the smoke bomb was being repaired, new books arriving to replace the waterlogged ones, and the children's nook was thriving with Lila's drawings proudly displayed. Kiera's colleagues, once wary under Sophia's rumors, now treated her with quiet respect, and her role in exposing the conspiracy earned her admiration. But Kiera focused on Lila, who skipped through the library, oblivious to the battles fought to protect her. Kiera watched her daughter, her heart a tangle of relief and lingering fear. Sophia was gone, but the past resurfaced. Owen back at Helix Innovations was swamped with meetings and media requests, and his company's gene therapy is now a beacon of hope in the biotech world. Yet his thoughts were with Kiera and Lila. The summit had been a turning point, not just for his career, but for his heart. He'd missed years with his daughter, and the guilt was a constant ache softened only by Lila's growing trust. Their park visits, their story times at the library, her drawings of the Starman each moment, was a step toward fatherhood. But he knew it depended on Kiera's willingness to let him in. One crisp morning, Kiera received an unexpected call from the university president. He said, "We're naming a new community library initiative after you," his tone warm. A generous anonymous donor funds the Kiera Thompson Literacy Fund. It'll support children's reading programs across Boston. Kiera was stunned, her mind racing. She suspected Owen immediately. His wealth and quiet determination fit the gesture. When she called him, he didn't deny it. "I wanted to do something real," Owen said, his voice steady over the phone. "Not a ring, not a promise you're not ready for. This is to show you I'm here for you and Lila in the way that matters to you." Kiera's throat tightened. The gesture was profound, rooted in her love for books and her dreams for Lila. It wasn't a demand for commitment, but a testament to his understanding of her world. She met him that evening at the new library site, a modest building in a working-class neighborhood, its foundation just beginning to take shape. Lila ran ahead, sketching the construction cranes, while Kiera and Owen stood by the fence, the city's hum, a soft backdrop. "This is too much," Kiera said, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know how to repay this." "You don't have to," Owen replied, his gaze on Lila. "I've spent years building things, companies, therapies, a name. But this feels right. For her. For you." His words carried no expectation, only sincerity, and Kiera felt her defenses soften. She'd guarded her independence fiercely, but Owen's actions spoke of partnership, not possession. Over the following weeks, they fell into a cautious rhythm. Owen visited Boston regularly, balancing Helix's demands with time for Lila. He took her to the planetarium, taught her about galaxies, and marveled at her quick mind. Kiera joined them sometimes, watching Lila's laughter bridge the gap between them. One night, as they walked through Beacon Hill, Lila slipped her hand into Owen's, calling him Dad for the first time. The words stopped him in his tracks, his eyes meeting Kiera's silent question. She nodded, a small smile breaking through her reserve. It was a start, not a promise, but it was enough. Kiera, too, was changing. The library fund gave her a platform to advocate for literacy, and her quiet confidence grew as she spoke at community events. She began writing again, drafting a children's book inspired by Lila's love of stars, a project she'd shelved years ago. Owen read her early chapters, offering feedback with a gentleness that surprised her. He said, "You're good at this," handing back a manuscript page. "Lila's lucky to have you." The words stirred something in Kiera, a recognition that she too was lucky to have Owen, not as a savior, but as a partner willing to meet her halfway. They didn't rush into romance. Their history was too complex for that. Instead, they built a foundation of trust, sharing meals, planning Lila's future, and healing old wounds. The letters Sophia had stolen were now framed in Kiera's apartment, a reminder of what they'd overcome. But the past wasn't entirely gone. One evening, as Kiera sorted through library donations, she found a note tucked inside a book. "You won this round, but watch your back." It was unsigned, but the tone echoed Sophia's venom. Kiera showed it to Owen, who tightened security around them, his protective instincts flaring. "She's out of the game," he said, his voice hard, "but we'll be ready for whatever comes." As winter approached, Kiera and Owen stood together at a groundbreaking ceremony for the library fund, Lila between them, holding their hands. The crowd applauded, but for Kiera the moment was private, a family taking shape, not perfect but real. They'd fought for this, and for now, it was enough. But the note lingered in Kiera's mind, a whisper of danger that suggested their story wasn't complete. The brownstone on Commonwealth Avenue was a far cry from Kiera's old apartment, its expansive windows letting in streams of morning light that danced across hardwood floors. Moving in had been Owen's idea to give Lila stability, without uprooting her from Boston's familiar streets. Kiera had hesitated, wary of his wealth, but the house was a compromise, modest by his standards, warm by hers, with a small backyard where Lila could play. It was their first step as a family, tentative but hopeful, a new chapter after the storm of Sophia's schemes. Kiera unpacked boxes in the living room, sorting books for the shelves Owen had built. Now, nearly complete, her children's book manuscript sat on the coffee table, its pages marked with notes. Lila bounded in, holding a model rocket Owen had helped her build. "Look, Mom, Dad says we can launch it this weekend." Kiera smiled, the word Dad no longer jarring. "Sounds like a plan," she said, ruffling Lila's hair. Owen was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, a task he'd taken to with surprising enthusiasm. His life at Helix remained demanding, but he'd delegated more, carving out time for Kiera and Lila. He taught Lila about enzymes and DNA, turning science into stories she loved, while Kiera encouraged her to write her own tales, blending stars and imagination. Their evenings were filled with laughter, board games, and quiet moments that felt like home. But the shadow of the past lingered. One morning, as Kiera checked the mailbox, she found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Sophia wasn't alone. "You're not safe." The words sent a chill through her, echoing the note from the library. She showed it to Owen, who immediately called his security team, his face grim. He said this could be a bluff, but his tone betrayed his worry. Or it could be Crane's people trying to scare us. Kiera nodded, her protective instincts flaring. "We can't let this touch Lila," she said. "She's been through enough." They agreed to keep the threat quiet, doubling security around the brownstone and the library. Owen's investigator dug into the note, tracing its origins to a burner phone linked to a former associate of Crane's. The thin trail suggested Sophia's network was still active, even with her disgraced and Crane under scrutiny. Kiera threw herself into her work at the library and into her book to cope. The Kiera Thompson Literacy Fund was thriving, launching new reading programs across Boston. She visited schools, reading her draft chapters to children, their wide-eyed wonder reminding her why she fought. Owen joined her when he could, his presence a quiet support. He'd begun funding scholarships for underprivileged students, inspired by Kiera's passion, a way to give back beyond Helix's labs. Lila, meanwhile, flourished in their new life. She enrolled in a science camp. Owen recommended her drawings, now filled with rockets and galaxies, often featuring Mom and Dad together. Lila pointed to the stars one evening as they sat in the backyard. "Which one's ours?" she asked, leaning against Owen. He smiled, pointing to a bright speck. "That one. It's called Lila's star because you shine brighter than all." Kiera watched, her heart full but wary. The anonymous note gnawed at her, a reminder that their peace was fragile. She and Owen met with the investigator weekly, piecing together leads. They uncovered a name, Marcus Holt, a former colleague of Sophia's who'd vanished after the summit. He was linked to Crane's shell companies, a potential enforcer of their schemes. Owen tightened security further, installing cameras and hiring guards, but Kiera insisted on maintaining normalcy for Lila. "She deserves a childhood," she said, her voice firm. We'll handle this. One night as snow dusted the brownstone, Kiera and Owen sat by the fireplace, Lila asleep upstairs. They reviewed the latest investigator's report, which hinted at Holt's location in New York. "We're close," Owen said, his hand brushing Kiera's. "We'll end this, I promise." Kiera nodded, leaning into him, the warmth of the fire mirroring the tentative warmth between them. Their love was new, untested, but growing, rooted in shared battles and a shared daughter. The future was uncertain, and the threat of Holt and Sophia's allies was a dark cloud. But as Kiera looked at the rocket on the mantel, Lila's latest creation, she felt a surge of hope. They'd built something tangible, a family, a home, a purpose. The anonymous letter was a warning, but also a challenge, and Kiera and Owen were ready to face it together, for Lila and the life they were forging in the heart of Boston.